it just occurred to me a little bit ago, I was telling Marissa and Mandy when I walked in that on the driving down here today that this was actually, I assume it's kind of a trap because I get a chance to speak once in a while, but first of all, you all know you're not really very smart till you're 50 miles from home. So I'm too close to home to be an expert. And then, but I flashed back to Tanner's oldest daughter, Stella, 3 or 4 years ago. She's 7 or 8 now, 8, Tanner. But anyway, she was at our house, and I looked over at her, and she must have a little bit of the entrepreneurial spirit from the Kinzler family in her, because she's about 3. I looked over, and she's standing on a bar stool. And when I looked over, she was in this position, just going like this, and I was half scared, going, oh, Papa blew it. She's going to get a mark on her face when she goes down. And so I very carefully said, Stella. I didn't want to startle her too much. She looks over at me and I go, Stella, what could go wrong? She looked back and she goes, gravity, Papa. So I knew that the entrepreneurial spirit was there, and then because she was willing to do what she was doing, but then the gravity thing, and then so anyway, flash forward, I'm driving down here this morning, I'm going, oh, wait a minute, I'm speaking in our own building. I've got dear family here, I got dear co-workers, have been with us for decades, I got partners, ex-partners, friends. What can I talk about that's not going to get edited and verified whether it was true or not? But anyway, I want to take a couple of minutes. Jason asked and Brian asked me to, maybe tell 3 or 4 stories of, what got us going, what I learned from, and I think is probably the most important thing, and kind of go from there. Well, I didn't add too. There's a couple hecklers in here too. As I was thinking about who was coming, I looked at the list last night, so you know who you are. So keep it quiet. A lot of times people ask me, well, how'd you get started? What started you? And there's several answers to that. But as I think about the one thing, and I'm sure you can all relate to this, that sticks in my mind is I was working, and a couple, 3 people in the room will know who I was working for. They were there with me. We were working for a pretty good, very entrepreneurial-driven company. Mid-sized commercial drywall contractor. I was the superintendent for him. Long story short, I was asked to run a really large commercial job, and the company was having some challenges at the time. The job had started poorly. We weren't heavy into the work yet, but being the entrepreneurial person that I am, and even as an employee, I would like to think that I was, cared much about the company, but I went to the owner and said, how about for an incentive for me, I'll study the plans. And this was a large commercial job where we were steel framing, drywall, we had all the acoustical ceilings, we had the whole thing. How about I study up on this, and would you agree to pay me half of the labor budget that I save? Would that be a fair thing to do? And he was excited to do that. He, I think, had enough confidence maybe I could do that. So he did that. We did that. And we came in, the job went fairly well, as good as it can go. And this was a long time ago, because we started in '84, and it was a couple years before that, so it was '82 or so, and got done, and the numbers burned in my head. It saved a little bit over $8,200. I had about $4,100 coming that still hasn't come. And I say all that to say, what did I learn there? And some of that soaked in over time because it drove me out of the company. It was an integrity issue, period. I went in, met with him about the money. I didn't get the money because he had other problems. So he put his problems in the company that were on me. We all got that, right? It's tough. Business is tough. And so myself, a couple of guys sitting in the room, not to be named, but you know who you are, have great businesses today. They were there. And I think between 2 or 3 of us, looking at John there, we could name another 5 or 6 people that have great businesses today that all work at that company at the same time. So what a lesson to me in, your people are first, right? Period. For customers, everything else. Sometimes, customers are first. No, they're not. Our people are first. And that team was unbelievable that he had. And history has proven that out. He couldn't have seen, he didn't know where everybody was going. So I think that's a good one. I would add, the other thing I learned there, partially, because I'm not real good at this yet, is watch out for the shiny stuff. Because that entrepreneurial leader, one of the reasons he didn't take care of his people, and the main reason he didn't have the cash to treat the business right, he was always chasing something shiny over here. So it's like, this is grinding, it's producing some cash. Let's go get in the RV business. Let's go get in the restaurant business. I said that out loud. I've done that. It didn't work for me. And I think you all know what I'm saying there. So I just wanted to throw that one out there. You guys keep me on my timer. I just wrote down several, there are 2 or 3 here. I'll hit a couple, 3 of them. Tanner talked about the grit and the grind story. It's almost urban legend within our company. Everybody's heard it a little bit, but there's 4 or 5 individual phone calls. I can remember distinctly jobs we said yes to and so on, that they were big steps forward. We learned a lot. Sometimes you made some money that launched you forward. Sometimes you got your butt kicked, but you learned a lot and it led to something positive anyway. I think we all can understand that. One of them, there's people around here just call it the 12 building story, but I was still a firefighter at the time. I was out of town actually at an arson investigation state training, and Yvonne calls me at the end of the day when I'm done and says, hey, a guy called in today and has 12 hog sheds to blow insulation into. This was on Tuesday. And he says, if you can blow them by Sunday, blow all the attics. We're talking about, blowing these attics with you that aren't familiar with the insulation business, but it's basically a manufacturing process. We're out in the field. We grind up the insulation or re-mill it, and then we blow it into these sheds. But it was several acres of buildings. When I talk about 12 sheds, they're 400 foot long by 60 foot wide. You can do the math. And we were primarily a little drywall company at that time, doing a little bit of insulation, and had one low production blower. And the story, what happened from there was fantastic. Yvonne says, "What can we do it?" And I said, "I don't know how, but say yes. It sounds like an opportunity." And we did. And so I spent the rest of the night calling. My dad had just retired. A couple high school kids I thought could get loose evenings, and we took the small blower we had and figured out a way to keep it running 24/7. Ran it 24/7. I called a supplier that I was good friends with at the time. He was willing to take semi trucks to the gravel roads. Couldn't get semis into where the sheds were, so then we had to figure out a way to shuttle that. I just say all that to go on. To Tanner's point, one of the things that Tanner and I often, in our leadership here, often talk about is it's really hard as you get a little bit bigger for the machines kind of running. We do a lot of stuff for a lot of people, but do our people, and I'm suggesting to all of you, do your people, because many of you, you're here getting better. I'm preaching to the choir, hopefully, about being entrepreneurial, but do they go, oh, that could be cool, or do they ask the next question? We don't do that exactly, but what are you building there? What's that lead to? And those kind of things where it's pretty easy in the grind of the day, and I'm already up to my eyebrows, and I don't even know how I'm going to get through tomorrow, to go, nah, we don't do that. We actually don't. Actually, we don't work in that area over there right now. And you know what I'm saying with that. So again, it was a tremendous learning experience for me. I could go on. That story could be a book by itself, because the owner of that company became a good friend. Did millions and millions and millions of dollars of business with him over the next, we're still doing business with him. And that industry slowed down, but it was a tremendous step forward. I wrote down a note here on another one, kind of one of our internal infamous stories, is it's called, I got a call one day I'd actually booked, we were still doing drywall install. I had 3 hotel contract, and we really weren't, again, doing a ton of insulation. And back when we started, there really weren't insulation subs to speak of. Most generals shove fiberglass batting in the wall. Insulation wasn't looked at through the eyes that it is today of the energy conservation that it does and how important it is to seal the house up. So that being said, guy calls, hey, my insulator, that was some guy from Oklahoma City, is not showing up, and the hotels were in the Des Moines market here. Could you insulate it? And I mostly tell this story to say, yeah, we said yeah, and this wasn't as tough as doing the 12 building story was, but the thing that happened was I said yes, and I called Yvonne and said, hey, see if you can find a better price on these 2 SKUs of product. We're going to buy several semi-loads of them. She calls 1-800-JOHN's Manville at the time, and I end up getting introduced to the rep from Minneapolis, which to this day is still one of my best friends. And again, this was around 1990 probably at this point. And there's a couple things I learned from that. One is that relationship led, a couple things I'll hit here if we have time on, that relationship gave us other opportunity, as well as Kinzler, and we still have a wonderful relationship with John's Manville today. We became one of their primary insulation testing grounds. So over the years, we've helped John's Manville develop products, gotten tremendous treatment in a partnership with them that led to this guy from Minnesota. And I hadn't met him, he helped us out. And the other story, I just wrote to a little thing in our intranet internal thing the other day about this. He, shortly after he set the deal up to get the material, I still hadn't met him yet. He calls me up, he says, hey, I hear you like to fish. I said, yeah, I love to fish. He goes, I'll never forget how he said it to me. He says, hey, I'd love to take you out on the lake for a day, go fishing. I love to fish too, but I want to learn about your business. I want to learn everything about your business. Simple request. A lot of us would go, if that guy didn't ask to go fishing, I probably wouldn't have gone. But I said, I'll go fishing, I'll talk and drink a couple beers. He truly, like I said today, to this day, he's a good friend, but he helped build this business. He was that kind of guy, I call him, he was a classic old road warrior, upper Midwest rep that became a good friend, and that helped, but the partnership was back and forth, and there's, as everybody here knows, there's a trail of wonderful stories of the relationship between our two companies. And there's been a number of those over the years that got us going. We did a chemical plant one time. I got a call, and this is an important one. Actually, Wendy, our HR, asked me to do a little training thing on this. We have a thing here called the sunset rule in the company, and it says that everybody gets called back by sunset. So it's easier to do in the summer when the days are longer. But I say that to say that, and what does that mean? That means that everybody deserves that, right? Even the person you don't want to call back, even the person that there's a hanging chad, I don't have the answer yet. But I think we've had the sunset rule here for a long time. I think today, hopefully you'd all agree that with text and instant, even emails now, don't have the people you work with expect an email within an hour. I don't know, it's ridiculous. It really, really kind of is, but people expect it. But the story I was going to mention, we did up in Sioux City, we insulated a chemical tank. If you can picture when you go up along the river in Sioux City there, the chemical tanks are those monster, they're about 130 feet up to the rim, huge domes. They actually have a ceiling in them, and then that dome is kind of like the roof, and then there's a hole you can crawl in up there. But I got a call, I was out in the field, running a job, company going 100 mile an hour, looking at my list of people that had called. A guy from Texas had called. I thought, hey, call me, I got a job for you up for Midwest. Now that's one where we're already buried alive. Guy from Texas, what's this going to be? I called him back. We ended up getting this job I'm talking about. It was to this day probably the most, however you want to measure it, gross profit dollars per dollar work per hours. It turned into, but the job itself was an incredible logistic challenge. It was at an active chemical plant. We had to go through all kinds of things. I was there every minute myself for a little over a week to do it. It was multiple semi-loads of rock. It's an unbelievable thing, but the biggest thing of all, it was one of those jobs where, how many of you ever seen the movie Pretty Woman? Remember the negotiation when Julia Roberts is in the tub with soap suds up around her, and Richard Gere's sitting there in his suit, sitting on the edge, negotiating what to have her around for a week because he's got all this stuff that you go to, and they spar back and forth, and it all ends with her going, I'll do it for $2,000, and she splashes in the water and is all excited, and then after he's going out the door, she says, I'd have done it for $1,000. He said, I'd have paid $4,000. And this is one of those jobs where I had to estimate it, and I'm doing it, and it's like, it's totally outside the box, and so it's like, okay, it's this much material, got that figured out, all logistics, and it's like, but I better throw in another day, and I better throw in another day in for 7 guys, and I better throw in this piece of equipment, and by the time you're done, your gyrations in your head are going, by the time I'm done, I've got a new truck. I said, you know what, if we do this, I deserve a new truck out of this. So I put a complete blow rig on it, which is, at that time, was a $100,000 deal. Add that on there, on top of what I thought was a lucrative deal, and call him up. He says, okay, can you be there on this day and guarantee me you'll be done on that day? And I said, absolutely, I'll be there every minute. He says, do it. Fast forward, we do it, went well, we were on it, did all that. Call him up, Julia Roberts story. He says, I called up, just follow up, hey, are you happy, and can we do another one for you when it comes up somewhere? He says, absolutely. He said, how'd you do? I said, we did really good. I said, I'm gonna be honest with you, we made good money. I said, how was my price? He said, I've paid twice that. Anyway, there's several lessons. I haven't gotten over that yet. All of us hate leaving money on the table, right, in a big way. So I haven't gotten over that part of it. But the sunset rule was born because in that final phone call, he says, listen, I said, well, why'd you pick us? And he said, you called me back first, same day. He said, I called 5 guys that day. He'd gotten 5 insulators in upper Midwest, and I was the only one that called back that day. He told me later that my price actually was the highest, so I had that little bit of satisfaction of the ones that bid it. So anyway, how are we doing, guys? One of the things I wrote down here, people often ask me, how did you get in the distribution business? It was born at Wallabies Bar and Grill in Ames, so all you Wallabies fans, there's 2 or 3 of them that I had a beer with last night there. I put that on there because, and I started out with a good friend, and looked like a brother, John, and I, and another guy, not to be named, was, we started as partners, and it was just, we were all going 100 mile an hour, very entrepreneurial. But the key thing there was, it was another one where, when the first conversation with the rep, we couldn't get anybody to sell us. We talked about the concept and the idea, maybe we should do this, but nobody would sell us material because they didn't want the conflict of ticking off another customer. So the rep on this particular day got kind of thrown out of a drywall distribution house down here in an angry conversation, and he was mad enough, and he liked us anyway, he knew us, but he said, oh, my bosses they just won't let me sell you. Well, that day he calls his boss on the way back he's headed back from West Des Moines to Ames, and the boss says, all right, do it. If they can be up and running in 2 weeks. So that was the conversation. He's driving, he goes, of course at this time my office is in our West Ames building, and he says, can you meet me at Wallabies in 30 minutes? I says, absolutely. Got there. He said, well, talk it through, you can do all that, but the condition is, can you be up and running in 2 weeks? Kind of like the 12 buildings, I had no idea how we were I had to have 2 boom trucks on the ground and find them and all that, and it's just like, yeah, we did it. Now, am I saying anything about this was easy? No, this is tough, guys and gals, you know that. I often have people say, they'll meet with me, go, yeah, but I want to do what you did. And I said, I doubt it. I doubt you want to do what we did. Now, a lot of you in this room have done it and are doing it, and that's why you're here. So this group is fun to talk to that way, because the energy around that entrepreneurial spark and spirit of going, let's figure this out, because you know, the harder it is, you know, that's where the money's at. That's where the good relationships are at, because you develop a mutual thing where I need you a little bit, you need me, we can make this happen together. I should add, why is Tanner still here? Since it's all friends and loved ones, right? No, I put that on there. He's here because he's phenomenal at his job. He's way better at it than I ever did. He's a great manager. And he's done everything in this business and done it hard and long and strong. And some of those horror stories, some of the stories of the ag stuff, and man, of him and who was just Mike Krause, one of your sidekicks, guys he came out of high school with, the stuff those guys did, phenomenal. It was phenomenal. But very exciting. So fast forward, typical of a family business, Tanner wouldn't be here if I didn't think he was the best person to be the president and CEO of this company. I'm not a person to go, oh, just because you're my son or daughter that you can do that. Most of you know that. But that being said, I love working with my son. And there was a point where, as he was doing different jobs in this company, and I believe he was doing sales and doing all of our route sales, there was a time when we sold a high percentage of the lumber yards in Iowa, distribution. A little bit, you know, can you all remember when every town had a lumber yard? It's hard to remember. There's not very many anymore because you got a Menards every 50 miles. But that being said, Tanner was doing that, a very tough little business, but I think that was the core. It doesn't really matter what the conversation was about, but my lovely wife and his mother, Yvonne, ran the office for years and years, up till a few years ago, and wore all the hats of all the things that go on. But we were all in that headquarters up there. But one particular afternoon, Tanner and I were crossways with each other, and I don't know if I fired him or if he quit. First, we sometimes would argue over that. You know, you can't fire me if I quit. And I said, no, I fired you first, and you're out of here. But we were having we didn't do that much, but we were really having a chest to chest over some stuff, and I was probably pretty tough and cruel. And I got home, brings a tear to my eye. And Yvonne straightened me out, for no better way to put it. But I put this on here. I'm blessed to have her, and it's not too many people work with their wife every day like what I came up through doing. And she's my best friend, and she's not afraid to say anything to me. And there's a lot of couples I've had just recently 2 or 3 conversations internally here about, how does your spouse tell you when you're messed up, screwed up, thinking wrong, all that? And everybody's answer is a little bit different. But we sat at the dinner table and sat down, and Yvonne just very calmly says, are you planning on working with your son long term? I said, yeah, I hope. She says, well, this ain't gonna work. He's way too good, and you didn't treat him fairly today. And I hope I apologize. I don't know if you can kind of remember that. It was probably several of them. But I tell that story for a much even bigger reason. It's something that's dear to my heart, and I talk about it in a Christian aspect when I talk to men's groups and stuff a lot, and that is the power of the tongue. And I had a tough one. Many of you in the room, some of your buddies, we all have them, guys, gals. And I'm not just talking about working with your coworkers or the people you're selling to or standing on a job site squaring off about a conversation. But one thing I have learned, and I'm not saying this that I got it figured out, and I'm not great at it, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. And that is to control your tongue. And any of you that ever pick your Bible up, pick up James. And I want to say about the 3rd chapter in there. He spent some time talking about it. One of the examples he uses is your tongue is like the rudder on a large ship. And I can't think of a better example. And all of us, everybody in here, I know for a fact, is in some kind of leadership influencing role. And even some of you go, I'm not really no, every one of us is, if you influenced somebody today already, you are a leader and you're on that path. And so I just would challenge all of you. It's passionate and dear to my heart, because this is one of the things Yvonne was continually reminding me of. And it wasn't just that conversation with Tanner, it was others when she'd go, you weren't fair. You were maybe cruel. And I was not trying to be cruel, but she would always say, think everything matters. Everything matters.